Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. In this video, I'll be discussing DashCAT-13. So DashCAT-13, if you haven't given, please give it. We are going off on our blind attempts of DashCAT-13. I gave the blind attempt for LRDI and Quant. Maruti did it for verbal because we had checked the sections as such. So that's from a student perspective, what we thought of the section, what would be a reasonable score in the section and so on. So let's get started. Let's start with the Quant section. Basically, I felt this was a difficult section, more than like if you have average CAT difficulty level and if you say 40, 45 is a fair score or like 99 percentile score in a CAT level section, 40 to 45 would be a 99 percentile score there. I felt this was slightly tougher than that. I think a fair score here would be slightly under 40, or I think just about 38 to 40 would be a fair score in this particular section, given the fact that it was moderately difficult. Again, one important thing to remember over here is that not all the questions were difficult, and if you were particularly good in arithmetic, there'd be not much difference what you would actually see between this and a easier sectional as such, or an easier quant section, because basically most of the easy and moderate questions came from arithmetic. So if you are somebody who attempts every single arithmetic question and gets every single arithmetic question right, you would easily get about 9 questions of this particular section. So you would still get a fairly decent score if you have actually a fairly good proficiency level in arithmetic. So let's take a look at this. 2 easy, 11 moderate, 9 hard is a fairly tougher this, but I also felt that some of the, this is basically based on the attempt. What students found hard, what students found moderate, what students found easy. But I felt here the 9 hard was a bit overstating it, because there were many questions which I felt were categorized as hard but were not hard questions as such. I'll come to that later. But this is definitely on the tougher side as compared to most of the average DashCAT quant sections, where you would have like 5 easy and around 11 moderate and 7 to 8 hard as such, or 6 to 7 hard as such. So basically, I would say that this is definitely on the tougher side. However, what I feel was that there were many questions which are doable, which you should have gotten right. Essentially, there were things that you should have definitely skipped. But barring 4 questions like that, which are definitely something that you should not spend time attempting, there were at least a good chunk of questions which you would have been able to solve, and you could have easily scored above 40 if you had actually stuck to a plan like that. So, and cleared the cutoff as such. So let's take a look at where should you have actually focused on, where you could have scored. As I mentioned, arithmetic was the section that you should have really done well in to do well in this section, because 7 of these 11 moderate were from the arithmetic section. Both the 2 easy were from the arithmetic section. These 9 questions were easily doable. These are something that you should be expected to do in an actual CAT kind of a scenario. So if you got any of these 9 questions wrong, you should definitely take a look at where you are making mistakes. Is it like silly errors? Is it that you have not covered certain concepts in arithmetic? Because you should be very rock solid when it comes to arithmetic as such. There were 2 hard questions in it, and these were definitely, I felt, those that you should skip, because the questions itself were like this paragraph long, and whenever questions themselves are that big paragraphs, you should know that you're going to take upwards of 4 minutes to solve that particular question. So it should definitely not be a question that you attempt in your first look through. Geometry was 1 moderate and 2 hard, and actually the one of these that was actually classified as hard was actually very easy. I got it incorrect because I didn't read the question properly. But essentially, if you consider symmetry of triangles, if you consider that in quadrilaterals you can split up, or in like different polygons you can split up the polygons into triangles, it becomes actually a very, very simple question. I got it wrong because I took the ratio of shaded area to full area instead of shaded area to unshaded area. But essentially, it was a very easy question to do if you actually read it properly. You didn't have to solve anything. You just had to actually rely on visual information. Just looking at it and counting, you could have solved it under a minute and gotten it right if you had not made a silly mistake. So I felt there were 2 doable questions within geometry that you should have ideally done. The algebra were 2 moderate to hard. They were not difficult, but they were time consuming. Essentially, they were based on one of them was quadratic. It was based on basic concepts, and if you have clarity of concepts, it was easy to do. The other one, which was based on like I think inequalities, was slightly tougher to do and had a lot of people are very uncomfortable when there is negative signs around inequalities. So for those who are not sure of inequalities or considering enumeration of cases and all, I can understand skipping that particular question. But still over here, there was one question that you could have done. From number system, we had one moderate question, but also a doable question. PNC probability, there were two questions that were actually marked as moderate to hard. The PNC question about the flags was slightly longer, so I can understand if you are not very comfortable with that. But the probability question was like basic probability concepts, like direct application of formula can be done in under like 2 minutes, should have definitely been attempted. A lot of people, I think, were not able to attempt it, and a lot of people, it was classified as hard because I think a lot of people are just skipping on the concept of probability. But if you know the concept of probability, it is not a difficult question at all. And this is where basically people will kind of outshine their peers. If you have left probability, if you have left geometry, then you have lesser margin to actually leave tougher questions, because there will be tougher questions from arithmetic also. There will be tougher questions definitely from algebra. So when you start leaving subjects, what happens is that even if an easy question comes from probability, and I know a lot of students have left probability because they feel that it's a low weightage topic, and it's difficult for and not intuitive for a lot of students to understand. But when you start leaving subjects, the number of questions that you can actually leave because they are harder kind of reduces, because you have left even easy questions as such. So the probability question was one of those questions that you should have attempted, and that would have helped you rise above the competition as such. The modern maths question, one was moderately hard, one was this, one was a logarithms question. Again, it was an easy question. Again, it was marked as a hard question, but the logarithms question was an easy question. And I'll tell you why it was an easy question, because once you know the formula, that if you know that log b raised to q, if you know that this is, you can just write this as 1 by q times log a by a to the base b. If you just know this one formula, that question was a very basic progressions and series question. But a lot of people don't remember the formula, don't remember or can't intuitively remember the formula, can't quickly apply the formula. And there is where it, instead of being a moderately difficult question, it becomes a hard question. So that is basically what you have to keep in mind. Wherever you are skipping concepts, wherever you have not revised concepts, wherever you have skipped topics, essentially with 22 questions, there will be difficult questions from the topics that you have done, which you won't be able to solve. And with leaving out topics or leaving out sections or topics as such, it leaves you with lesser room to actually attempt as such. So with that in mind, go and at least do the basics of many of the topics that you are considering leaving. Do at least the basics of probability. Revise every single formula of logarithms, because remember, like logarithms has like 11, 12 formulae, and if you actually mug them up and have them at the tip of your tongue, most of the logarithms questions become solvable. So please go and revise all of those things. These questions should not be hard. They are just hard because a lot of students have ignored preparing for them. So this is where you would get your competitive advantage by preparing. So now let's take a look at the LRDI section. I felt this was an easy section as compared to all the previous DashCATs. There were 3 sets which I felt were easy to moderate, and this has almost never happened where 3 sets are easy to moderate. But I felt 3 sets were very, very doable in this particular section. There was one harder set, but the remaining sets were actually fairly easy as such. But what happens is that there are 2 things that actually made easy sets a bit difficult as such. The bubble charts was an easy set to do, and almost all students found it very easy to do. So there was no difficulty there. There was a 2D space LR which was easy, but it was lengthy. And when people see that they have to draw things out, they feel that this is going to be a time sink. But it was easy to do. And whenever there's a 6 question set, and if you just have to draw out things and you get the answer, you should definitely attempt. Because what happens is that if you spend 15 minutes on it and you get 6 questions right, it is a very good investment of time, a very good return for your time. On the other hand, the earliest number was an easy set, but it required basically knowing the concept. Or if you don't know the concept also, if you just spend some time understanding the concept, it was an easy set to do. But in fact, a lot of students found this very hard to do. I just solved it actually, and it took me less than 5 minutes to do the entire set. You just have to consider 3 cases, and if you do those 3 cases, you can solve the entire 4 questions in under 5 minutes. When I saw that, I first realized that okay, solving it now versus solving it under a exam condition is different, and people kind of tend to get stressed under the exam condition. But I also felt that knowing the ERDOS concept as such would have made the set very easy and approachable. And it is one of those sets that if you actually keep your, if you are calm, if you are cool and collected, there were essentially 3 or 4 clues that you had to consider and form linear arrangements based on the 3-4 clues. You get 3 possible cases for the linear arrangement, and linear arrangement is that something that you should absolutely do. So I felt this was a very easy set, but if you take a look at the attempt rate for that, it has been classified as a very hard set as such. And it's just basically mental block. If I would suggest go now and try to attempt it, knowing that it is a simple linear arrangement, and see how much time it takes you to actually solve that set. You will realize it doesn't take much time. But a lot of people see that it's an ERDOS number concept, see there's like a long exposition about what is an ERDOS number, and they suddenly feel that I can't attempt this set. So always remember, be open-minded about things. Many times sets that appear difficult are not really difficult. Sets that appear lengthy and are 6 questions are sometimes very easy to do. So all of these, with these 3 easy sets, many people should have done very well in this particular section, but didn't do actually. Because firstly, mental block about certain types of sets, and also fear of lengthy time sink kind of sets. With that, I would suggest just go back to those particular sets and take a look again. There was an Einstein's puzzles kind of set, which I also attempted in the particular sectional because I felt that was the safest choice, given that I am fairly okay with doing Einstein's puzzles kind of sets. But that was actually the hardest set of the lot as such, and that took me a lot of time to solve. So counterintuitive, what you are very good at might not be the best choice. Take a look at all of the sets with an open mind. Things that you might feel are easy might be difficult. Things that you feel are not doable might be easy to do. So take a look at that set again. Take a look at each of those sets and keep an open mind about all the sets that you encounter in LRDI. What might seem very difficult might not be very difficult to do. So this is my analysis of quant and LRDI. As with LRDI, also go back to your quant section, take a look at every single question that you either skipped or got wrong, and just take a look at with like a calm mind that if you look at it now dispassionately without like the intensity of the exam, can you solve that particular question? And you will find that many of the questions were fairly solvable. So even though a lot of people found many questions very hard, they were solvable with a calm mind as such. So this is my analysis for LRD and Quant. Maruti will do the analysis for verbal. Thank you for tuning in.
Hi friends, my name is Maruti and I am the co-founder of Cracku. In this video, we'll be looking at the analysis for DashCAT-13. So let us first get started with the verbal section. The verbal section of DashCAT-13 was definitely on the medium side. I think this is definitely slightly easier than the earlier DashCATs because I felt at least 2 RCs were definitely attemptable. They were not very difficult to read. In fact, 3 RCs were not difficult to read. I think only the 4th RC I felt was definitely very difficult to read. If you're looking at the topics, the first RC was on emotions. It was about pets and whether they can feel emotions or not. I am a pet lover, so I found it to be a fairly easy read, a breezy read. And even the questions when I attempted, I thought I'll get all of them correct, but I didn't get one of them correct. Still, I felt this was an easy RC to read. It would not take you more than like say 7-8 minutes to read and complete the questions. The second RC that I attempted was the numeric sense in animals. This I think was not very easy. This took me 2-3 readings to really get a sense of what it involves, because this also involves some science and psychology, how our brain works, all of those things which got slightly technical. Because of that, it took me multiple readings, maybe 2-3 times. I didn't read the entire passage, but at least 1-2 paragraphs I had to reread to get a good idea. So that's why I felt this was on the medium side. But once I read it, it was not a very dry passage. It was interesting in its own sense, but not an easy, breezy read. This was definitely on the medium side. After that, I attempted 4 questions in verbal ability, which is what I typically do. I attempt 2 RCs first. After that, I go to the verbal section and I attempt say 3 or 4 questions. Here, the 3 questions that I attempted were parasummaries. Parasummaries were fairly on the easier side. I'm actually quite good at parasummaries. One of the videos that I would recommend you to watch is the complete verbal revision by Saili. With there, she explains very well how to actually answer parasummaries. I used the same tricks and I was able to get most of the parasummaries correct. Parajumbles, I'm slightly not super good. Over there, I felt there were 3 parajumbles which were there. I felt they were not very straightforward, but they were not as difficult as earlier, where I was able to get at least the connections between the sentences I was able to make quite easily. But the final arrangement, I was not getting it correct. So typically, when you have 4 sentences, 1, 2, 3, 4, I was able to connect that 2 and 3 come together. and 1 and 4 come together. But whether it is 2, 3, 1, 4 or whether it is 1, 4, 2, 3, these are the final steps where I was losing out. But overall, I didn't think the para-jumbles this time were very difficult. Each of the sentences were also not very long, and there were immediate connections that could be made. You could figure out that, okay, these two sentences definitely come together. So that's why I was saying that para-jumbles were on the medium side, not on the difficult side. The odd one out, on the other hand, I felt was very hard. The reason I felt this was hard is because the strategy that I used to figure out the odd one out, normally when you have 5 sentences, I don't try to find the actual order of the 4 sentences and then figure out which sentence is odd one out. What I normally try to do is I try to figure out which of the 2 sentences come together, as in what are the pairs. For example, if I figure out that, okay, 2 and 4 come together, then I know that both of them will not be the odd one out. The odd one out will be either 1 or 3 or 5. But in both the odd one outs, I was able to get connections for multiple sentences. Essentially, I felt each of the 5 ones is going with at least 1 or 2 of the others. So immediately finding out which one is the odd one out was not very straightforward. So that's why I felt the odd one outs were on the harder side. Coming back to the remaining 2 RCs, the RC on Satan, Eve and Temptation, I thought would be difficult, but it was not actually very difficult. So if you look at the order in which I attempted the RCs, I first attempted the first RC, this one. Then I attempted the third RC. I attempted verbal questions, and then I came back and I attempted the third RC over here. Probably after attempting some verbal questions, maybe my mind was more not as tired, because of which I was able to get this RC done fairly easily, and I also had high accuracy, and I could feel that I was able to read and understand each of the paragraphs quite well, what the author was trying to say. So overall, I felt this was an easy passage, even the second RC. And finally, I went with the last RC. This was on philosophy, especially ancient philosophy, European philosophy. So something that I'm not super comfortable with or very interested in. Because of that, I couldn't really focus a lot on it. And remember that this is the last RC I was attempting after the entire section was over, and I had less time remaining also. For many of these reasons, I found this RC to be very difficult, and I was not really able to understand many of the lines or many of the passages or how they actually fit in. When I attempt a reading comprehension, after I skim through the passage, I at least get a idea of what the author is trying to talk about. Then I read the paragraph in detail. This is basically my strategy. Over here, for me to really understand the gist of the entire passage itself was taking a lot of time, because of which I felt this was a hard to read reading comprehension. Overall, I would say somebody who is aiming for a good score, a very good score in verbal section would be say 30 plus in this section. If you are scoring above 30 in this verbal section, you are going to do very well in CAT.